welcome back. Today, we're going to tell you about what happened on session 4. And let me be frank, it gets a bit spicy today. It wasn't a super long session, but a bit of a break in the middle due to some alterations in one of the players' network at the time. They're getting a new supplier now, so hopefully that'll help them out in the long run. But also, Mother wasn't feeling too great at the time, so we didn't get a huge amount done this session. But what was done was admittedly all my notes, but also a bit of spice today. So let me tell you about that. We returned to the party in Bone Town. You may remember Bone Town. It was a, how should we say, a little faraway town, right? This town was very, how shall we say, bony, lack of a better term. It was surrounded by a ribcage of sorts, a massive thing, and this ribcage essentially covered the entire circle of the town. Within it was a set of ramshackle buildings, with one very ornate market. Before they got to the town, though, they encountered a strange group. They encountered a group known as the Weeping Monks. Who are the Weeping Monks? They are a death cult. They are a group of monks who are an offshoot of the Way of Mercy. Now, why does this matter? The Way of Mercy doesn't just mean healing, it can mean putting someone out of their misery. Mercy is many things, after all. So, the party had a choice to make, whether they wanted to interact with these monks or not. Asaran, being old as he is, recognised them, and advised maybe against it, but never really said to or not, mostly due to his oath of being unable to make decisive decisions for others, or himself for that matter. But he was hesitant, rightfully so, as this group essentially have different views on what mercy means, and what, their cause is. Their general belief is to help those in suffering. Normally it's the seriously ill. They're a bit like the Leper Knights over in Gordlon and in the West. They essentially travel the world with these beaked helms on, and if I remember to put it in editing, you will see those beak helms. They use this sort of aesthetic, and the image I used was from the, I forget their name, but they were from Pathologic. If you know, you know. But they wear that kind of robe to hide themselves, with their small diminutive acolytes, these really emaciated, ill people. Again, an image from Pathologic to represent them. But I felt like the worm people from Pathologic fit quite nicely for what I wanted. These diminutive creatures that were sickly and ill, following the monks in hopes of a cure or purpose. The monks were healing people, but their healing can just as easily kill, after all. They are Way of Mercy monks. If you know anything about Way of Mercy, you can use Hands of Healing, but also Hands of Harm. They're a cool monk, actually, and they were they were the D&D team's attempt to make a less Eastern-inspired monk, which I quite like, because sometimes it's hard to fit a monk in to a more Western-themed fantasy. So, it's interesting to me that they've done that, the very play doctor aesthetic, and honestly, I like it a lot. But we can get into Way of Mercy monks another time, perhaps, but I do like them. As much as I've complained about monks recently, and I want to assure any monk players, by the way, I don't hate monks, I actually really like them. I just wish Stunning Strike wasn't your best thing. I wish you had more than that. Like, the rogue's got sneak attack and it's amazing, but it doesn't break the game. Damage alone doesn't break the game. Stun, however, can, just disable a fight. for both sides, honestly, from DM and player perspective. So it's, yeah, it's a funny one. But again, know that I don't hate you or monks. I like monks a lot, and in fact, I do want to play one at some point. Now then, moving on to the party's actions in Bonetown. I swear to God, that fucking bike. One of my neighbours insists on revving the damn thing up way too much than it needs. Anyway. So, the party entered Bonetown. The building's a mix of wood, bone, chitin, stone, whatever they could find, with one exception. The market. The market is this elaborate sandstone structure. On the crest of it, a symbol of a hand clutching a sun. And to explain that symbol a bit in my setting, that is the symbol of true freedom. No gods, no masters, no kings, no emperors. Freedom above all else. It is often the symbol of rebels and renegades over in Beijing. And it's a movement that's not religious, but it is a belief. There's a belief that the gods put... It's not super religious, but they ape on religion a little bit in that they fully accept the teaching of the gods, but they believe that, well, the gods didn't force us to be in kingdoms, did they? The gods didn't force one to be above others. The gods put us here. So anyone who's saying they have divine mandate to rule is wrong, because actually no one was put here above others initially. So no one's chosen to rule. And that is essentially their logic, and why a lot of them thrive in the barons, because no one can rule the barons. Only one king can rule in the barons, and he wears a crown of horns upon his head, and mighty antlers that reach into the sky, his yawning grin still adorning his corpse. The beast is the one and only master of that land. Let never be said that any other can rule it. Many have tried, all have failed. A little bit of love for the barons for you. Now, moving on, the party went to the market because they figured it was a good place to gather information and also resources. The Barrens is an Arctic desert. It does not rain, the snow is tainted as a result of the beast's presence, its corpse almost preserved by the cold, and the many mutated monsters that live there, some of the most diabolical things. The beast may be very active over in the west, but that's because that's where it projects its will, its force of being, its ego. Its body is back in the east, and as a result, really ancient and terrible creatures have been born from its power. One, which we will see today, actually. One of those ancient horrors, or a descendant of one of those ancient horrors. To a reminder for those who, whether I mentioned this or not, or for those who haven't been here for other episodes, the Beast is a force of evil in the world, an eldritch god of mutation and power that cares little for its followers. In fact, its followers are more parasites, really. You don't gain power from the Beast, you steal it. If it ever figures it out, well, if you know what a Chaos Spawn is from Warhammer, then you can kind of gather what it'll do to you. Put a Wendigo skull on the thing and antlers, and yeah, that's basically what it does. Sometimes, though, it will bestow a blessing. When it takes your flesh and moulds you into something new. The sign of the Beast is sort of the Wendigo skull. It's very Wendigo vibe what I'm going with for the Beast. So if it has that same, like, deer antlers skull, though, for a head, that's how you know it's a creature of the Beast. Truly. And not just a mutant, but like something that's actually moulded of it. Creatures that were once elks and moose and that kind of thing are a particularly potent creature because they are the closest to its look-alike. A bit like how in the Cthulhu mythos there is a Cthulhu god specifically, or an Eldritch god, sorry, specifically about snakes. And he's all about protecting snakes, and he looks like a snake. He's very tied to snakes. His image is snakes. The Beast has a similar imagery with that, but with elk, deer, non-predatory animals being turned predatory. This strange thing where a moose will just bite and tear into a person. And the moose is powerful enough they could do it. If they were a predator, they would absolutely fuck you up. But anyway, that's a bit of lore on the Beast there for you. I did promise lore these episodes, and here's a bit of lore for you. Back to the market though. Over in the market, the party split up into three. There's only three of them. We start with Asaran. Asaran needed powder. He can retrieve the balls of his gun just fine, but he needs the powder to fire them. And believe me when I say, he makes good use of it. His weapons are lethal and tear through many FO with quite a degree of ease. To the point where, from a player to DM perspective, we have talked about whether he's too powerful or not. He is very powerful. It's a very effective build he's made. I will say. Not a build I would have expected, but a very effective build. The Gunner and Sharpshooter mixed with a Kensei Monk 5 Fighter 1. Incredibly powerful. In a campaign where power was like everything, it would be perfect. And as far as combat's concerned, it's just a very potent combination. And the sad thing is, I don't hate it for that at all. I don't, because it's quite, impressive to see. But it does maybe outshine the other two quite significantly. But it's something we've talked about, and if the player's listening, again, you let me know how you feel on the matter. We've talked about it a bunch. But it's definitely it's a powerful build, and obviously he needs to be able to fund that build, because, powder ain't free. Thankfully, powder's cheap in this land, and he finds a powder merchant. Powder merchant, a tabaxi who maybe loves his powder a bit too much, offers him for a fair price. He even offers him a bag of gunpowder. Now you might say, isn't that the same thing? Not quite. The black powder is an older form of propellant used in old day flintlocks, cannonballs, that kind of thing. Gunpowder's more refined, and I essentially treated that as, when using the flintlock, it would make it a line shot. This line shot gets used for a good reason later, but I wanted to experiment with non-magical AoEs, and Asaran was the perfect vessel for that. Because I like the idea of giving my players utility items, or things they can do, especially martial. Big thing this campaign I wanted was martial focus, because I wanted to kind of figure out ways of making martial characters have the same amount of options as casters. It's really hard in 5e to do that, and that may be more a 4e thing, but in 5e, I really wanted to try and help martial characters get a bit more out of themselves. So obviously we've got a paladin, he does magic, but like the monk, he's got a little amount of options, but AoE is not really a factor for him. The paladin to most extent, there's no AoE. In fact, the group has no AoE, to be honest. The warlock doesn't have any AoE spells. Has some CC, but not a lot of AoE, unless he steals it, of course. If someone tries to cast a fireball near him, Molly's going to steal that, so he'll have a fireball. But then it's one of his 2 spell slots, because he's a warlock. But yeah, so he acquired that from a dubious powder merchant. The merchant has other kinds of powder. The kind that, you get what I mean. That kind of powder. And other dubious stuff. Along with a set of red antlers that he was shaving for his medicinal requirements. Yeah. He has some issues. A lot of people have their own coping mechanisms. Now, Rak went to get furs. He acquired himself an Asran set. Ren basically is let's just say his thermal regulation's just fine. His parasitic patron is probably warm enough in there to boil water, but because of his symbiosis with Ren, he doesn't boil the poor little kobold. The two are on good terms, so we'll get to Ren, his amusing antics. He gets a bit lost. Now Rek does do something a bit interesting and a bit funny. He decides to buy a pelt which came from a creature that has been haunting Felkavir Valley. I will get to Felkavir Valley, don't worry. I'll save you that lore blurb till later. But he's warned, on no uncertain terms, this creature is still out there, and that pelt is something it literally slapped off its own body to get out of a trap. But it still haunts the land. Rak decided to buy this pelt, even being warned that it may attract the creature's wrath, to reclaim his pelt. If for nothing else other than some kind of primal pride. But Rak decided he wanted it. So, my dear Paladin, you will get exactly what is coming to you. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. Now then, he did buy a set, another pelt of a mutant wolf. All the beasts in these lands are mutant, to be fair, for Asaran, as despite the monk's lack of complaint, he is but a fairly well-toned, built, half-elf gentleman in fairly thin robes. It's cold. He's feeling it, even if he's not saying it. On to Little Ren, though. Little Ren. Before I get to Ren, actually, Rak also learned of a means of transportation as well. We'll get back to that. Returning to Ren, though, our dear little Ren decided to go wandering because he's a little magpie, and just had to look at all the shiny things. This included all of the working girls that were around the market as well. It is that kind of market. Well, I said that kind of market. No people are being sold. That is one thing that wasn't on sale. There was no slavery or anything like that, actually. But there was, nighttime workers, shall we say. Red light district, you know. Not that he engaged in any of that. Ren is quite innocently minded. He just sort of watched some of the dancers and then moved on. Commenting himself how they must have been cold in some of their more scantily attire. Ren then sort of descended into the market, wandering through, unbothered, as many of the merchants are hesitant to bother people. Mostly because if you live in the Barrens, you're probably the rougher sort anyway. You kind of have to be. At least in Bone Town. The Husk is a whole other thing. But Ren ended up in a strange part of the market. For a second, his, perhaps in paranoia, made him think everyone was shrinking, or he was growing. But actually, he was in a part of the market where smaller people resided. The likes of goblins, gnomes, other kobolds. And he found a strange group. He didn't know this because he didn't speak Gnomish, but they were called the Broken Chain. They were a group of slaves that had escaped. They were actually from the Kingdom of Neymar. A little blurb about Neymar real quick. Neymar, shall we say some of its more intricate structures required smaller hands to construct? The elaborate tapestries on the churches and depictions of glories of their knights. Shall we say that required small hands? Many of those small hands were unwilling small hands. Neymar believes itself to be above those of diminutive position. They have had many a war with the dwarves as a result of this. But they are also quite known for holding the smaller peoples hostage to construct things for them that are quite precise. As many in Neymar lack the... There's not many masons that have the skill to do those finer details, mostly out of laziness. People of Neymar are quite a gruff people who have kind of forged themselves into this very regal aesthetic, but it's kind of like, imagine a brute playing king. You know, they look regal, but their hands are still able to snap your neck. You know, their pets are these massive hounds that are so beefy because they sort of have to be. Many in Neymar are descended from Goliath, larger, stronger, but built a human. People who stayed in Neymar were a tougher breed of people. So, very warlike people. And they kind of had to adapt to being a non-warlike people once they had settled. Not many wanted to cross the lands of the Khan to go to Beijing. But rightfully so. The Khan is not a welcoming host. So many of the broken chain had come to the Barons to be free. And they kind of had their own version of the belief of ultimate freedom. You could argue it's a cult, but it is a proper faith. One of their speakers, a gentleman who Ren wouldn't know, but the guy was called Grimsh. Grimsh was a former, or shall we say, he was put above his fellow slaves to keep others in line until he realised the horror he was committing. You might say, well, how could he not? He was kind of raised in it. He didn't know any better. But then when he realised, oh, I'm only treated slightly better than everyone else, and I hate this, this is horrible, he led them away. He wasn't the only one, there were many others, but there was an uprising, and many did escape and go into hiding. Some are still in chains, but this group went to the Barons, and now preach of a peaceful life of true freedom. They don't believe in violence. They are, I guess you could compare them to an anarchist kind of movement. They don't believe in violence, they want freedom. Ren didn't know a lot of what they were talking about, though, because he couldn't understand Gnomish. But he did understand from a tablet, because he could read anything, he has that invocation, lets him read out all things, that they were breaking free from the chains. So he surmised that they must have been slaves, the free sort of clawed brand on their neck, kind of indicating this as well. Symbol of Neymar ownership. The talons of command, as it were. But this is details that he wouldn't know, but I'm telling you, the dear viewer, as a bit of lore I couldn't regale. So I'm regaling it now. Also to fill up the episode, because there's not a huge amount of notes to go over here. So I'm making this worth your while. Now then, the party, Ren, after this, left the little group and then encountered a wizard who was selling a number of magical items. A anaphane, a knife that will kill anything it touches, eventually, including the wielder, an orb of hut, which would allow him to instantly cast, leaving his tiny hut, no preparation, and a bag of tentacles. You may ask, what on earth would you need that bag for? Well, those 10 tentacles are a weaker, but a cast of whole person, but you'd use a dex save instead. I do need to stat those out at some point, so I'll make sure I do that. I forget to do these things sometimes. I'm not always the smartest. That's on me. I need to do that, so that's a reminder for after this recording. Now, of course, Ren decided he wanted it. He was going to go for the knife because it was... Well, the knife was like... Not just pitch black, but it was dark. It was... If you've ever seen that paint that's like the blackest black you can get, like that. and he wanted it. His patron wisely pointed out to him, though, "Why do you want this?" Ren said, "Well, it looks cool." He said, then his patron pointed out, "But it will kill you. Why do you want this?" And then Ren changed his mind. He then asked his patron, that he lovingly called Simon, and Simon said, see the pun here, to get the tentacles. He think the orb might be a good idea too, but Ren decided he didn't need it, as he could already do Leona's tiny hut, which he could, just takes longer. But yeah. Ren acquired the tentacles rather, and wandered back to the group, regaling them of his wanderings, and Rak trying to very sternly tell Ren not to try and consume the tentacles, whilst Ren was considering consuming the tentacles. He is a little cretin of a creature sometimes. Bless him. Now, something I didn't mention before was Rak was tipped off about a means of transport to the husk. This transportation method is not exactly pleasant. How shall we say? It requires the use of something called a bonapede. What's a bonapede, you might ask? A massive, titanic centipede covered in the bones of its victims. Why on earth would you use this as a mount? Anywhere else in the world, you wouldn't. But one Goliath over here managed it. And using a complex system of armor plating around the face, not to protect the creature, but to protect him from it, a metal cage on its back, and a not so subtle amount of scamming some people into getting on for free, he's been able to keep a business going ever since. I'll get to the part about scamming people to get on for free. That might not sound like a scam to you until you realise the cost of free. Now, the party were warned that it would cost 30 gold a head. They did have a lot between them, and I intend to keep it that way. I kind of want to make them use their resources carefully. I gave them a lot of money in Hitara, but they're on the run here. Not going to get a lot of money easily. Not unless they want to delay their journey a little. Which, maybe in Neymar they will. We'll see. But they were warned about the price of going for free, because the driver of the massive centipede did offer a free ride. The cost of free, however, well, let's just say he'd feed you to the centipede halfway through the journey. If you survived, guess what? You got the rest of the journey for free. Well done to you. You weren't going to survive, though. It simply is not an option for you. Survival against that thing in the middle of the desert, it's not happening. And it didn't happen for those who came on for free. You might say, well, surely the party would have done something about that if that happened. Well, it did. They were in the cage because obviously they paid. They were safe from its wrath, as the centipede maliciously stalked its victims, all bar one, who was eaten by a giant spider, a giant trapdoor spider. Because yes, it's that kind of horrifying place where even the snowy frigid lands have giant horrible monsters like that. Now, that's not even the supernatural shit, that's just a giant spider. That's just a giant spider, that's all it is. That's not even supernatural. Not for that world, anyway. Asaran particularly pointed out that, well, maybe this isn't exactly, what their lord would want. And he's not wrong. Their lord would not want this. But Rak's kind of gone full revenge mode. He is a vengeance paladin, and in his mind, the ends justify the means at this point, and he'll accept the consequences of his actions once it's over, for better or worse. Now, Asaran couldn't say much to it due to his oath, but needless to say, he was disappointed. Ren did not do much either, but Ren also kind of wanted to stay out of it. He was sort of unwilling to really involve himself too much in the matters. But the party got so far, and arrived at the edge of the husk. Now able to see the massive corpse quite closely, they were near a small town, and a drop-off point for the centipede. That was as far as they were taken. The town, however, was quiet. Too quiet. Needless to say, things had gone very badly. The party entered a church, only to discover zombies, but not just any zombies. These were the Lost of Vtuber. Might wonder, what's that mean? Well, these zombies were not raised by a necromancer. These zombies were raised by a beast born of hatred and evil. A creature known as the Despoiler of Vtuber. Vtuber is a valley just past the husk, on the way to the Kingdom of Neymar. One of the many reasons people from Neymar don't go into the Barrens from that way is because the Despoiler of Vtuber wanders there. A massive moose, whose head his head rotted to reveal a twisted skull, and antlers bleed red continuously, with eldritch power flowing through it. This now truly massive monster. It was a... what would it have been? It's not size large, it's the size above. Do forget now the name, but it was a 3x3 token for him, let's put it that way. And this creature ravaged that area, slaughtering many, and any humanoids it slaughtered, it would gore in its tusks. Well, tusks and antlers. After a time, it would drop them off. They would rise again as zombie thralls under its control, having little antlers themselves protruding from their heads, and, shall we say, a connection to it. They would simply utter the words, "We hunger," and "We hear our bleating lord. His hooves thunder and cry." Truly a unpleasant thing to find in a church, you might agree. So the party went about dispatching them. These undead, however, had a trick up their sleeve. A psionic ranged attack, which would incur a insanity token on the victim, and a debilitation of movement for a time, until another wisdom save was done. Astran was hit by this, but let's just say the insanity token mechanic won't become relevant this time. It will later, though. And as long as he rests, he will lose that insanity token. If he doesn't, well, that's not my fault, is it now? But the party went to work at the church, tearing through many of the undead, though their undead fortitude certainly did keep them going for longer. There was, however, the main area of the church, which was filled with 4 thorn torres, a set of porcupines basically mutated that could launch their thorns at people, and a massive beast made of multiple bodies. This undead abomination ran towards the party with great haste. I say undead, it's somewhere between life and death. I guess that would be undead, technically. This Ravager managed to get rather close, but Rack decided to pull out, and I don't know where he pulled this out from his arse, but he pulled it out. He ran to the creature and delivered onto it 2 blows. The second of which was the mother of all crits. Needless to say, we were cheering. He did 102 damage that round, absolutely bisecting the creature and nearly removing its head in a single, couple of strikes. That second one, I said, almost beheaded it. And its head's pretty big, its main head, that is. And if I remember, there will be a picture of this creature. Now, he managed to kill it before it could even make a move, because, as you may remember, all my party's martial characters get maneuver dice. Rack's maneuver is to attack before he gets attacked. So he maneuvered and slew the creature before it could even do anything. He had 104 health and he massacred that thing in a round of combat. Beautifully. The creature never got to even dare get an attack off on him. And because of protection from evil and good, or peg, as my party like to call it. Yes, they do say they're being pegged when they're using it. Yep. One of these days, if I ever get a chance to stream a session of anything I do, when protection from evil and good turns up, you'll see that. And, yeah. They all like being pegged, apparently. Jeez. Opening you up to my party's in-jokes there. My apologies. This is not going to be the only one. So, after dispatching many of them, they heard a noise outside. You may remember, they were on that centipede. Well, there were others who paid. Those others were hiding. And, well, let's just say the despoiler was in town. They were brought before it by the other lost and other beasts that were present, and it gored them upon its mighty antlers, adding them to its flock. It led its procession away from the area, with a number of other beasts in tow. A mutant bear, twisted and mangled beyond belief, and a crocodile, contorted and evil. A regenerating horror. Both of which should be pictured, hopefully, in the editing process. Editing me. Following that, the party wandered over to a few of those horrors that were left, and dispatched the fallen shooting creatures rather quickly. Ren, who had been hiding at one point, had wandered over to an altar. Another in-joke of my party is that all my altars are cursed as fuck. And that player's character always ends up getting fucked by them somehow. So Ren went to touch it, only for, surprise, our dear crowboy, Royale, to appear, who questioned him as to why he was going to touch such a tainted altar, covered in gore and viscera. You know, obviously defiled, and tainted by something evil. But, you know. Royale also mentioned he was following the party, for his own amusement. You may wonder how. Simple. Royale's unbound now. He has no master. He can do what he likes, and he's decided watching this revenge plot through to the end is amusing for him. He's also my way of adding any commentary in-universe I want to do too. He's become a useful tool for me. So occasionally I puppeteer him for my own needs now, from a DM perspective, but he's not a DM PC. Occasionally he'll pop up for a humorous interlude, or maybe as like a side thing, but I don't intend to abuse him too much. Like, at the end of the day, he's there to be a little humorous addition of some comically evil crowboy, and frankly, I just enjoy the antics that get caused when he turns up, but he will only turn up every so often. I don't intend to have him turn up every session. I just thought that was a funny opportunity to do it, to put a twist on the usual thing that happens when they start messing with shrines. Now then, that was where the session ended, and Next time, they'll be going to the Husk, a place built from death, but filled with life, and a true demonstration that people can thrive anywhere, even in the corpse of an elder god. But that's something we'll have to discuss next time, isn't it? Of course, next time will be in a couple of weeks, so I'll see you then. Of course, I'm going to be streaming as always. At the time of recording, I believe it is a Sunday, but you'll probably be seeing this on the Tuesday, after my birthday. Do feel free to leave any birthday wishes today if you'd like. If you hadn't joined me on the Friday's birthday stream. But yeah. This will be a bit of a longer one as I added some lore bits into it. I do hope you enjoyed that, and I'm going to try and add some more lore bits in where I can, just to flesh these out a bit more and give you a bit more to chew on. But with that all being said, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I do hope to see you all next time. Till then, ta-ta for now.